Next week, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan will deliver his 2012 budget speech, in which new tax laws will be set out for the year ahead. CNBC Africa will be covering the minister's speech extensively on the day. However, in order to make a few predictions about what will come out of the budget day speech, we are joined in studio by Andrew Wellsted. He's head of tax at Norton Rose South Africa. Very warm welcome to you, Andrew.
Thank you.
I was just asking you your expectations of where the focus is going to be on this year's budget.
Look, the focus, obviously, we're in a tough international climate economically, and South Africa itself is running with a budget deficit. Some of the old issues that we've been looking at in previous budgets are going to rear their head again. So job creation, infrastructure expenditure, how we fund that's going to be the key from the tax side. Where does the money come from for these programs? And then there's things like the national health insurance, government-run social security. There are a number of issues that the government has committed itself to, and we've seen them develop over the last few years. And now we're hoping for some clarity as to where they're going to fund these projects from.
I want to talk a little bit about that focus. I mean, it seemed as though last week, listening to the President's State of the Nation, a lot of commentary that came out of that, or that they seem to be more focused now on what the government could do in terms of infrastructure to support the private sector to be able to create those jobs, as was previously where it seemed as though government had a lot of focus on it creating the jobs. Do you think that we're going to see that shift perhaps in the budget?
I'm hoping so. Government as the major employer in society really creates a washing of funds, which is not ideal. Private sector needs to be stimulated, particularly the building industry. So, you know, these infrastructure projects are a good opportunity. They need to be undertaken. We need to improve the infrastructure in the country.
When you talk about clarity, though, because some of the comments that have come out is that we get these strong messages, we get these promises, and yesterday we were speaking to somebody from the construction industry, and you're talking about how important infrastructure is, and how some of those promises made by government haven't come through. So when we listen to the budget speech and what's going to come out of next week, do you think that we're probably going to get some follow through, some kind of commitment on more expenditure going there?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that they are committed to, you know, the government is committed to these projects. They've been developing over 2 or 3 years. A lot of these issues, not only the infrastructure development, but job creation, national health insurance, these have been themes that have run through several budgets now. They are works in progress, and in our view, the minister often uses the budget to put out feelers rather than to announce completed projects. And that's really what we're seeing now. We're seeing projects that are some way into their life, something like carbon tax. The green taxes have been discussed for ongoing. We expect something on that as well. So really there are a number of issues and themes that have run through recent budgets that we need updates on, particularly the funding of these projects, which is really where the tax side of things comes into it. So I think that we will see some progress. Whether or not we're going to see closure on them, we'll have to wait and see.
Do you expect any amendments to the structure of the tax system?
We don't expect fundamental upheavals, but there is a suspicion that some of these projects are going to have to be funded by specific taxes. So rather than increasing the tax rates on income tax or VAT, which is tricky from a political and a foreign investor perspective, that possibly what you'll have is a dedicated tax created to fund the certain projects like the national health insurance.
I want to talk about the national health insurance, because some of the proposals that have come out that we could see an increase in pay as you earn, we could see an increase in tax or payroll tax payable by the employer. What do you think is more likely to happen?
Well, in last year's budget, they suggested that they were looking at increasing the VAT rate, increasing the tax rate, or a payroll tax. I think it's unlikely. I think the tax base perceives itself as being overstressed, and I think we're trying to encourage foreign investment. That's evidenced by things like the headquarter company regime, which is a Treasury initiative and is going ahead. It sends the wrong message if you start tinkering with income tax rates or other tax rates. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some progress or some investigation into creating a new tax to fund things like the NHI.
When it comes to VAT, it has been touted as a regressive tax that's going to affect even the poor. Do you think that if if we were to go that way, where the funding is going to probably come from that it would be acceptable in terms of considering where we are right now when it comes to foodstuffs, especially where the poor are concerned that could be problematic going forward?
Look, hypothetically, VAT is a good tax because it's a transaction-based tax and you hit all of the consumers in the country instead of just focusing on your tax base, which doesn't necessarily cover all of the citizens of the country. In South Africa, that of course isn't true because VAT is seen as a tax which impacts on the poor more than it does on the rich. So VAT is a very it's a political hot potato, and we certainly don't think that with an election looming, they're going to tinker with VAT rates.
Big talk around that mining super tax. What do you think is going to happen, particularly if they do announce it next week? Do you see a gradual increment, or is it going? What do you expect? Do you think it's going to be, well, this is what we're going to do right now, or do you think they're going to probably stretch it out over a period of time?
Yeah, as I say, the trend in budgets is to put out feelers. This is what's on our agenda. This is what we're looking at, and then you develop it over a couple of years. It's not clear that nationalisation is completely off the political debate menu, but it seems that that's falling behind. So given that nationalisation is now something that the government has said publicly that they're not really that interested in pursuing, they now need to find an alternative. I think it's too soon to anticipate that the minister is going to step up and say, this is the alternative, this is how it's going to work. I think we're now moving in a different direction from nationalisation. I think it's the right direction. But, you know, investigations need to be done. There is a discussion paper which is floating around. And, you know, I think it's recognised that an increase in either the royalty tax or a super tax is not abhorrent. But obviously that needs to be developed over time.
I want to mention a little bit about the complexity of the tax system. You say you're not expecting any amendment, probably a build-up of what we have had already. But one commentator saying that the concern that complexity of the tax system is weakening the state's ability to implement the latest laws that have come in. Do you see that? Do you experience that?
Absolutely. We've seen a flurry of amendments, particularly around complex provisions that deal with transactions undertaken by financial institutions or otherwise, and this is part of an international trend. Internationally, revenue authorities are clamping down on taxpayers. That said, we don't, you know, a large portion of the country are not sophisticated taxpayers, and these provisions are introduced in a hurry. They create uncertainty in the economy, and they are unnecessarily complex. It is a continuing trend, though. We anticipate that there will be technical amendments. There will be new anti-avoidance legislation introduced, specific anti-avoidance legislation, and all of those things add to the complexity of the tax law. But that has been the trend for the last few years, and it's certainly not going to change in the short term.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Great.
That was Andrew Wellsted, he's head of tax at Norton Rose, South Africa.